Happy Tuesday, boys and girls. This is Mrs. Schlins, and on Friday, I began reading to you my favorite novel in the whole wide world, Where the Red Fern Grows by Wilson Rawls. I went over the vocabulary in Chapter 1, and I also read Chapter 1 to you. So if you have not done so, you need to go back to Friday's read aloud for your reading class and let me go over the vocabulary words with you and read the first chapter with you. So the first thing I'm going to do today before we start reading As the Red Fern Grows, I'm going to go over some vocabulary with you today. And Friday were my first two videos, and I was very nervous and I did not know how to pair my video with a PowerPoint, so I'm going to try to make it a little more interesting for you today, and I've got some pictures as I read and go over your vocabulary. So your first word today is the word fertile, and it is an adjective and it is a describing word, and it is used when speaking of soil or farmland, and fertile land is capable of producing vegetation or crops. And sometimes when your mamas or your grandmothers are planting flowers, they may use fertilizer, or your dad or your granddad in your garden. That's to make the ground or the soil more fertile. Your next word today is aromatic, and it is also an adjective and a describing word for a noun, and it means having a pleasant and distinctive smell. So you know what kind of perfume your mama wears. You can pick out that aromatic scent in a crowd, and you may not even know that your mama or your grandmama's there, and then you smell their distinctive or their pleasant smell, and you're like, I know mama's around. Our next word today is the word corn crib, and it is a noun, and it is a ventilated building that farmers store their ears of corn in. Our next word is grieve, and it is a verb, which is an action word, and it means to suffer grief, which means deep sorrow, and you may feel very, very sad, especially when someone passes away that you're very close to. Your next word is stout, and this is an adjective that describes a person that is somewhat fat, which is not a very nice term to use, or of heavy build. So you know somebody that's kind of plump or kind of fluffy. Another word for that is stout. Here's an interesting word that you may not have ever heard of before, and it's turpentine, and it's a noun. And it is an oil that is taken from the gum or the sap of pine wood. And once upon a time, especially my grandmother, she used this oil and put it on my minor scrapes. Like if I got a minor scrape on my hand or on my leg, she would put this turpentine on my scrape, and then she would put a homemade bandage around it. You're going to hear about that in the story. Game. Now, all of y'all know what a game is, but this is a different kind of game, and it is also a noun, but it is wild animals that are hunted for food for their skins, or they're hunted for food and their skins. Skins are very valuable in some animals, and you can kill the animal, eat the meat, sell the skin, and the skin is very profitable. Here's your next word, muzzle, and it is a noun, and it is a guard that is fitted over the mouth of a dog to stop it from barking, from feeding, or from biting. And my little dog Killer, you're going to hear more about him in the coming days. He's a little Chihuahua, and every time he goes to the vet, they have to put a muzzle around his mouth to keep him from biting them while they're giving him his shots. Your next word is bay, and that is a verb. And it's when a dog, and that should say barks instead of parks, I apologize, or howls loudly. And in the story, it's going to be used as baying. So the word baying will be used in this chapter. Now, what I would like to do now is review just a second of chapter 1, and that was from Friday. And the book begins in chapter 1 when Billy's an older man living in Idaho, just west of the Grand Teton Mountains. The time is probably in the 1970s. That's when I was a little girl. And he finds a stray dog that reminds him of 2 dogs that he had when he was young. And this is showing you where the Tetons are and where he was living. And I'm going to go ahead and look. This is Georgia way down here in this little bitty map. And here's where Billy was living when he was an adult. Now let's go on to chapter 2. Here's my introduction. The story moves to the land of Billy's childhood about 50 years earlier from chapter 1, and that was sometime in the 1920s or the 1930s. And Billy recounts his childhood in the foothills of the Ozark Mountains on the banks of the Illinois River in Cherokee County, Oklahoma. And I wanted to do a bigger or a much larger map. And here's where we are in little bitty South Georgia. And here is where Billy is living as a small child on his farm. And I didn't put an X here, but this is where he was living at when he was an adult in chapter 1. And I have a few points of interest here, some language that you may not understand or some sayings that will come up in chapter 2, and I wanted to go over those right quick with you. And the first one, he's going to talk of having a disease of puppy love. Well, this is really not a disease. The character is really wishing for a puppy. Most people call their father either daddy or dad or father, but in this story, the main character calls his daddy Papa. And I didn't know if you knew what Cherokee meant, but it is the name of a Native American tribe. And sycamores and birches and box elders are all different types of trees that will be mentioned in this chapter. Also, steel traps will be mentioned in this chapter, and they have a steel jaw with sharp teeth used to catch and trap animals' legs, such as bears and raccoons. Now, I'm going to go ahead and tell y'all I wouldn't want to catch a big old grizzly bear in a steel trap. But that's what some uses for steel traps are for. Billy talks about getting a peach tree switching, and this refers to getting a spanking with a twig or a limb cut off of a tree like a peach tree. And then the final little saying that I wanted to introduce to you is, I must skin my game. And this refers to taking the hide off of an animal that has been killed, and the skins of many animals are valuable and are sold. I know that I have a really good friend, her son sells coon or raccoon skins. And in a minute, they're going to talk about a collie dog, and this is a picture of a collie. And then they're going to talk about the red hound dog. And this is what a red hound dog looks like. So I'm going to stop right here. There's my introduction to chapter 2. I'm going to put on my glasses. I'm going to take a deep breath, and we're going to get started. So I'll talk to y'all in just a second.